Once you've taken an air layer, how do you then continue? How do you take it off? How do you pot it up? There's not a lot of videos on this. So in this video I'll share with you how I cut off air layers from a plant, pot them up, get them to root, so that next year they're also still alive. Because, let's be honest, a tree and a propagation technique are only successful once you've been able to get it into a pot, to get it to root into the pot, and then to grow onwards properly. In early spring I took a couple of air layers. I took one layer of my deshojo and one layer of my big pink maple. These were separated 2 weeks ago, and I'll show you the process I did 2 weeks ago to get these into the pot. I'll also share with you why I have 2 deshojo maples, even though I only had 1 air layer set, and why this is in a pond basket, halfway in a pot. What's going on there? This deshojo, I peeled back the bark. I put a little pot around the trunk line and I secured it in place. And of course then I filled it up with substrate, and I use regular substrate for this. When it is in a pot instead of in a bag, you need to water just like you water all your other plants. And then you just wait. The start of growth below the layering site. For me this is always a good sign. If I see this happening, I know that in the pot slowly the first roots are starting to form. I'll leave this on for another week or 2 and then I'll take a peekaboo. So we're now in late July. I am going to remove it today and see what roots are in the pot. Less talking, more action. Ratzeflats. A new tree. Yes, you see that right. I'm wearing a sweater. This summer is playing games with us. It's only 15 degrees today, and in a week's time we're expecting a heat wave. Roots have started to form, and in fact I see lots of buds sprouting at the base of the layer. That's a good sign that the function of the roots has been taken over by the roots here. Notice how well the callus is swelling here at this wound. So what I'm going to do, no time like now, that's. This is the most sensitive time for the air layer. Right now it has to rely on any new roots that have formed. Because we are getting a heat wave in a few days and I'm going to be traveling, I'm going to reduce the branches to just a few leaves. This is not the standard practice. Normally I would pot it up completely like this. I have prepared a little pond basket. I'm going to use a 3-point tie down to keep the air layer in place, and after that I'm going to place it in this pot, which will keep the humidity around the pot quite high, but provide stability. Let's get started. Let's see whether we can get this out of the pot and see how many roots there are. Keep in mind, roots at this stage are very fragile, so any bump or any tear can cause them to break off. Be very careful at this stage with your air layer. Look at those perfect roots. In fact, I can make 2 trees out of this. For the future tree, there's a lot of roots here on the side and only a few there. So it's logical to plant this in like this, which means that I'm going to remove most of the branches here. I'm going to keep more on this side. Reduce and reduce. And this way we have a small tree that's ready to go into a pot. Maximum stability, I'm going to tie it already on the pot gently until I filled it up with substrate. Key here is to be gentle, to tap the substrate down in this manner and or with water, and to not push the soil down. After compacting the substrate with a lot of water, I can now backfill a little bit. Another delicate part of the process is now the tie down. I'm not putting any force on these wires so that there's no accidental bumps against the roots in the next weeks. This really is only for the next 2 or 3 weeks, and after that the tree will have settled. I know this all looks a little bit unprofessional, but it is effective, and that's what it's about. And the lucky surprise, the side branch. You'll notice I've left a stub here. I have slight hope that more roots will form here on the side, and that with that I'll get some budding occurring and a nice nabari. So I'm gently leaning this in, and I'm just using the substrate I used for layering to fill it up, just watering, and this one is also done. So there we go, the moment of truth. There's a lot of sphagnum molds in here, and that typically sticks to the roots, but I want to get some of it out. We have to be very careful that the roots don't accidentally break because the sphagnum moss falls down. I see a root here on the side. I see some roots coming out there. It could be that there's only 1 or 2 roots attached to the layer. I guess we'll see that in a second. Hello, little spider. Sorry, ruining your home. And this is really not recommendable what I'm doing. Then again, I never do what I recommend. And I recommend everybody to do what feels right and to suffer the consequences. You do something stupid, you might be lucky, you might be unlucky. It looks like on this side I'm lucky. On the other side is a different story, because this whole ball of sphagnum starts to move and I can't put it down because there's a nice root on this side. You can also leave the sphagnum in. For me, the reason to not leave it in, it is quite compact. It is very wet, and if you then water every day like I am used to, you run the risk of the root starting to rot, even though you now have a nice air layering result. Gentle tug. It's always the last tug that kills it, right? But this is okay. Right. So now we have the sphagnum moss removed, and you can see the nice layering side here. This is where we removed the original bark. It has started to callus quite nicely. There's lots of roots here now. This is the original bark at the bottom, and this is where the dead wood is. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to gently try and peel away the old stub here. This is tricky. Decide for yourself if you want to go this way or if you want to leave it in place, and do this at repotting time in spring. As you can tell, there's not a lot of roots, so I will need to protect it against drying out, against the wind, against the sun, and the roots will need to follow later, and I'll show you a follow-up in spring. Just place it on top of the substrate. Any rotational force will quite easily snap off all the roots. So now I need to get this out of the wind, into the shed, and leave it there for a week or 2. It has been 2 weeks since I separated the air layers from the main plant. Let's take a look at how these trees are doing. First, a small one. If I tilt the pot a little bit, yes, a root tip at the bottom of the pot. Great. Now the deshojo, the big one. This has been put in a pond basket in an outer pot, and this is why. Look at that. Nice healthy roots. All around there's roots sprouting. Of course, for the other one, the big one, I can't tell anything yet. We had a bit of a heat wave, and you can see some of the leaves had a bit of a hard time. Some small branches have died off, but all in all, after 2 weeks, it still looks great, and I'm pretty confident that roots are developing here. Of course, the challenge now is to go from these roots that stand out from the pot and generate more roots on the inside. And one thing that I'll do, I'll put a little piece of wood at the bottom of the pot, and I'll put this pot on top of it. That way more and more air will get to these roots. Eventually they'll dry out, die off, and create new roots on the inside. So 2 days since I pulled it a little bit out of the pot, let's see. If you now look at the roots, you see the first root here has started to die.